Welcome back to Scratching the Surface on episode 42. Today, I will be reviewing 28 Years Later. I'm a little behind on this review, but I wanted to get one out still. Before I get into the episode, please, as always, check us out at scratchingthesurface100.com. You can read our monthly article blogs. You can leave and write your own horror movie reviews, and you can keep up to date for future horror movies for the year of 2025 and beyond. So, 28 years later, we had the returning directing and writing duo of Alex Garland and Danny Boyle coming back to provide a sequel to their original 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. Now, 28 Days Later was widely successful when it came out. It kind of changed the game for the zombie subgenre. The zombies were faster now. They were more dangerous. They were way more hard to battle and to defend yourself against. It was a lot harder to survive in this type of zombie apocalypse. You know, you think of your Night of the Living Dead, those were amblers, man. They were slow. You could run around them if you needed to just to survive. These ones were different. If they heard you or so as much sniffed you out, your life was in danger. And they've always retained that all the way through. It's always been common for these movies to have some really adrenaline rushed scenes with frenetic camera work that, you know, heightens the overall intensity of each scene when the action comes about. And I think they retain a lot of that here in 28 Years Later. Now, there was a lot of anticipation for this one. And when that is the case, sometimes the movie will fall a little bit short. I think I am in the camp of it falling slightly short. I still enjoy this movie. I would come back to it. And I think that it's one of the better movies of the year for sure. But it's not going to be the best for 2025. I don't know if it's going to end up in my top 5 by the end of the year, but I don't know. It's still very solid. I'll keep the first couple minutes spoiler free here, and then I will dive into spoilers. I'll look at some pros and cons in the film, again, which will contain more of the spoiler heavy content. I will let you know when that point comes along. So on a base level with 28 Years Later, what you're going to get here is a more emotionally packed film than what you're probably expecting or expected if you've already seen it. There is a lot of sentimentality contained in here. There's a lot of human condition that is spoken on and, you know, referenced throughout the movie, especially in the later portion of the film. I'd say in the back half for sure, we see more of that come into play. A lot of, you know, discussion on death and dying and trying to live with that and move on from that and making peace with it in a way, to not look at death as such a terrible, awful thing, but to look at it as a normal part of human life. And no matter what we do, we will die someday, whether it's from a rage zombie or from, you know, cancer. We will die. And I think that's a big point here in 28 Years Later, a big moral code within the film that the writers were trying to get at and trying to display for the audience. And that's fine. I think I was a little surprised to see it, but that's fine. I do think it makes the film suffer a little bit in terms of the pacing, which I'll talk about later on, but it's still just an enjoyable film in its own right, with those conversations being involved. The action that you find in here is really good when it is, you know, when it's in play. It's really good action. It's really well captured by the directors, by the cinematographers, and they really make it look good. They make it look convincing. The action is ramped up even more because of the stylish way they captured these action sequences, and they do it really, really well. Again, as a lot of you know, they use an iPhone 15 to do all of this, to capture all of the shots, which is insane. Now, this isn't just a typical iPhone 15 camera. They, of course, have extensions on it with, you know, all the lenses and all the apertures they need to make it look good on the final product. But again, they're still using the nutshell of the iPhone 15 to capture this film, which is really cool. And I think it's revolutionary to do this at this point. And I think an indicator of what's to come down the road from other directors, other cinematographers, to begin maybe, you know, trying out the iPhone a little bit more, experimenting with it and seeing what kind of advantages it can provide you as a director and as a cinematographer. So, you know, we've got a cast with some big time names. We've got a cast with some unknowns, but they all come together and I think they do a fine job. They're all fairly convincing. I think the location that we're set at here, just outside of England, is really neat. It takes place on this little small island that is removed from the mainland. And we kind of see our characters living out this nice little life on this small island. And there is more within the mainland that they are not aware of. And they kind of learn some secrets as they go. But the film as a whole, again, emotionally packed, some really good action sequences, some decent performances. That's really a good description of it without going into spoilers. So that is the spoiler-free zone. I will dive into the spoilers here. Well, I will look more specifically at some pros and cons, which is going to include some scenes. So again, spoilers will be discussed in this portion of the episode. So the pros and the cons, I've got, 5+ listed for each of these for 28 years later. There's some stuff I liked and some stuff I definitely didn't like after looking back on it and kind of taking note of them. I'm going to look at the pros. Number one, I just mentioned the emotion that is packed in this film. There's so many times in 28 years later where we see family and friends trying to survive just unsurmountable odds, trying to live to see another day. And it makes for this weightiness to the film, hoping that these characters make it through, hoping that they finally get the life that they truly deserve. And now on this small island, they've been living pretty good, but they are disconnected from society. They'll never really truly get back what human civilization used to be. And they're always kind of longing for that. And we see them going on that quest almost, if you will, to find human civilization. So our main character, the young little boy, the son of, I think it's Isla and Jamie, Spike is curious. He's a little boy and he's curious. All he knows is this small island that he grew up on. And he's really curious. He wants to go to the mainland to find out more. What starts out as initially just a hunting trip between Jamie and his son Spike turns into Spike's, curiosity and interest in finding out more about what's going on in the mainland. He thinks that there's something that his people are not telling him, and he wants to figure it out. He wants to take things into his own hands. So he goes to the mainland and finds out some stuff. Now, again, the cinematography, I think, is really good in this film. The actual setting is really quite incredible. This small island that our survivors are living on, starting out in the film, is just separated enough from the mainland of England to be safe from the zombies. And there is a causeway between the mainland and the small island that, if the low tide is there in the ocean and the water, it is low enough so that they can cross this causeway. Now, if the water rises, it is too high for anybody to get across that causeway without drowning. So this has served as this kind of solitude and protection that the survivors didn't even know they'd have, truly, but it has served a great purpose in protecting them and keeping them safe 28 years into this apocalypse. So I like that they're able to include this in here to make it more realistic, to be like, oh, hey, here's a really good way that you can survive a zombie apocalypse. If you have a causeway with a high and a low tide, you might have a chance. So I really enjoyed that, and there's some really good aerial shots of it. So we see Spike going in, and there's that emotion. He wants to figure out things, and he wants to get in touch with the human condition, with human civilization. We kind of go on that ride with Spike. So I enjoyed that. There's a lot of cogent dialogue. I think that the conversations that take place make sense. They are talking like normal human beings for the most part, and they are, talking about things that are relatable, that are relevant in our everyday lives. And I think that is enough to intrigue me as a viewer and keep me engaged. They are fleshing out the characters really well in the first act of the film. I think we get to know everybody pretty well. Honestly, I don't think there was any questions I really still had to some of the characters. I will say Jamie, the father of Spike, comes across as a little abrasive sometimes. I know he's trying to be that hardened father who's trying to keep his son alive, but sometimes it comes off just a little bit, I don't know, a little distasteful at times. And then Spike is, he's kind of he's a good character. He's fleshed out really well. And I'll talk about my con later on and relating to the characters, but everybody else is fleshed out really well for the most part. That matters. And it gives us enough of a background on who we're following through the film. Probably my favorite part of this film, one of the pros for sure, is the camera work and the way they capture those action sequences using the iPhone 15. There's this way they go about it. I swear they have like a bunch of different iPhones set up for an action sequence. So for example, let's say our character Jamie, the father, on their hunting trip, shoots an arrow. When that arrow gets to the front of the face of the zombie, we might have one angle of that moment. And then when it crosses through to the back of the head, we might have an angle from the back side of the head with the arrow poking out. all within a split second, which is really, really neat. And I think it makes for some interesting, stunning visuals to really help enjoy these action sequences to the fullest. I thought those were really cool. And then that kind of goes in line with the cinematography of the aerial shots that they were able to capture. There are some stunning moments where we see this aerial view shot of both the small island, its causeway, and the mainland. And that is really, really cool to look at. And there's just this visual clarity to each of those shots when we have the aerial shots of the land. It looks really stunning, and it's enough for me to be like, okay, that's really fucking cool. You can show me more of that and I'll enjoy this movie. And then, just the use of Chekhov's gun. This is my last pro. I think that when you bring a storytelling piece, whether an object of any kind that is mentioned in the first earlier portion of the film, it should come back with some relevance in the later part of the film, most likely the last final act. And we see that in the use of the crucifix that is worn by one of the unknown characters in the first 5 minutes of this film. He's a little kid that escapes his family getting just obliterated by the zombies to a church. And in this church, he sees a priest, and the priest tells him to go hide, and the priest sacrifices himself. He sees the end is near, and for this is salvation for him. And this kid goes and hides under the church, and we see a zoom in, kind of a focus on his crucifix that he's holding from the priest. And this crucifix comes back in a big way. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about at the very end of the film, when we see the group of, the merry band of guys wearing jumpsuits that save Spike at the very end of the film, that are killing zombies to some like 90s rap or hip hop. This is that guy, and it comes back in relevance, and it had a meaning in the beginning of the film, and it came back. So I enjoy and appreciate when they can do that and do it logically. Don't just give me something that doesn't matter. Give me something, if you're going to show it and you're going to focus on it, it better come back. So I enjoyed that. Now, some cons. Every film's going to have cons, and this one certainly did. And, in general, I think there was a mixed reception from a lot of people. I'd say more so people upset with the film than happy with it. Again, the ratings have still been solid, but some cons. The giant dongs, they were completely unnecessary. Although I do like how they try to be realistic with the look of the zombies. 28 years into an apocalypse, yeah, probably there should be no articles of clothing left on these zombies. They would have degraded and disintegrated within, 10, 15 years, probably. Is that a wild statement to make? I don't know. I think it would be the case. So they're naked, and that's fine. They should probably be naked, but why do they have to have giant dongs? These things are huge. Why are the alphas completely hung? Why'd you have to make them that big? They're extremely distracting, if I'm being honest, especially in the action sequences where the zombies and the alpha is chasing down the humans. It's just completely unnecessary, but I don't mind the people being naked. That makes sense to me. That's fine. And then the zombie babies. This was a big choice in the film to show a scene where the zombie is giving birth. Now, I get that these zombies can mutate in 28 years. They can evolve in their own kind of ways, and that's supposed to tie in with the evolution of humans as a whole. But I don't know, when you introduce a zombie baby, that's going to open up a can of worms of storytelling issues that you're going to have to deal with. And we've seen this time and time again, where there's a baby that's born that has this ability to continue living. He has the antidote. He's not killable. He doesn't get infected. Those types of things have been told so many times, to the point that when you see it on screen again, you're like, okay, did you really have to go with that? Couldn't you have done something a little more creative? So that's a little frustrating for me. The pacing in this film is a big issue. The first act, I've heard from a lot of people, they loved it, and I loved it too. I thought it was great. And then the back half, I do think it struggles mightily. It's so slow. And this is when you see a lot of that human emotion coming into the foreground, which is fine, but it's just not dispersed well. And it becomes very bogged down in the back half until that, surprise shock of an ending, which is another one of my cons here, because I don't know, it was a little bit odd. It was a little bit weird. It was, I get that it's supposed to excite us for the next film, because it does feel more in tune with some of those moments in terms of the feel of 28 days later, which is cool. And that's great to see. But it definitely is just a wild, out of left field moment, because the whole film we've been going through this certain type of vibe and feel and aura of the film, and then we enter this completely just, again, bonkers moment where these guys in jumpsuits that kill zombies to 90s hip hop music in the background show up out of nowhere and save Spike. To me, that's a little weird. And this is where there's some social commentary tied in. If you know what's his name, I think it's Jimmy Fazell, the producer of the Teletubbies. This guy is who these people are dressed up to look like. The main guy, Jeremy Renner, is the guy who plays him. He is dressed up to resemble that guy, Jimmy Fazell, the producer of Teletubbies, who was a bad man. He touched a lot of people and not a good dude. But the Jimmy Savile, I don't understand what the point of this really is. I think he said it was to have this like distorted remembrance of the past. I think that's what Danny Boyle or Alex Garland said they were going for. So how our perception of the past can become distorted over the years. So in the beginning of the film, the kid that has the crucifix that survives, his family all dies. They were watching Teletubbies at the beginning of that movie. Of the movie, when they get attacked, that family, those kids that are in the house are watching Teletubbies. And that's all he knows of Teletubbies. And he probably saw Jimmy Savile as a kid and thought he was really cool, like a lot of kids thought the Teletubbies were. And he never actually probably found out about Jimmy Savile. So he wanted to kind of dress like and be like Jimmy Savile. And that's who we see in those last scenes wearing the jumpsuits. He wants to look like Jimmy Savile. He's impersonating him. He's capturing the persona of that guy, and he never knew how terrible of a person he was. So there's this distorted remembrance of what was, but not truly knowing what human life was like, because he didn't really truly live through it as an adult. So interesting, probably unneeded for a tie-in, but interesting nonetheless. If you did see this movie, what were your thoughts? I would give it a solid 3 out of 5. I don't think it's worth a 4, but I still think this is a fine entry to this franchise. And again, I am excited for the next film. As always, guys, thank you for watching and keep watching horror.